And here we are. It is still week 2, day 1 of Web Fundamentals. We're going to cover the afternoon lecture. DOM manipulation is the topic. So let's dive into it. And then after this, we're going to do a lab. All right. We're going to, well, I'll explain when we get there, but let's do the lecture first. We're going to continue from this morning. All right. So it's from the same exact spot we left off this morning. We're going to continue on with DOM manipulation. So I'm going to reference the slide that we were using this morning, because this was our roadmap for what we're going to be talking about, dealing with. So this one here, we talked about this, right? We connected our JavaScript to our HTML page by the script tag that we added at the beginning, like this, at the bottom of the body. Then we are able to target certain elements by the keyword this. And then once we were able to reference them in our JavaScript, we can manipulate them. And we did this through adding the different events that you would see here to the HTML element that we want to change. So we'd attach this to the element through the event, through the function call. And then, so that was our introduction. Okay, we were able to make alerts pop up on the screen. We were able to remove elements from the screen. And so that's where we left off, with being able to complete button clicker. We were able to complete button clicker here. Well, we figured out what we needed to complete it, as well as the hover event. When we on mouse over or on mouse out of an element, we would be able to change something to it. We can change maybe an inner text, or we could change, we could just do something. We could remove, console log something, make an alert pop up on mouse over, mouse out. So this assignment wants you to play and pause the video on mouse over, mouse out. And I told you guys that there was going to be a possible problem like this on your exam. All right. And so we left off there. So let's continue from that point. But now we're going to talk about here the query selector. We said that we can access parts of the elements in our DOM through the query selector. This here is the query selector, this thing. We're going to use the query selector to access parts of our DOM. This is going to be a different way of accessing, different than using the keyword this. Okay, so we're going to create variables and then use those variables as connection points. All right, and we're going to be able to do something with them once we're able to connect through the query selector. We're going to be able to change the inner text, for example, right? So we can change the inner text. We can say .remove. We can do something. We can manipulate it somehow once we have that connection. Okay, so that's what we want to do first. We want to connect it and then change it somehow. So here we are. The query selector is the next topic. So let's look at the query selector. Here I am in the platform. I'm under query selector. And so let's go ahead and take this code and use it as a way to demonstrate an example of a query selector. Okay, so in order to do that, I'm going to create my HTML file. I've already created that. So let's go ahead and fill it in. And then we'll change maybe the title here to reflect what we're doing. Query selector. And then we want to link a CSS. Just let's make the habit of always linking a CSS and JavaScript before we get started. So here we are. We need to create a new file. So we'll say style.css. And then let's target that H1 and color it red, just to see it a different color so we know the CSS is properly connected. All right, so let's test that first. All right, and again, you guys should be making a habit of this. Oh, we didn't put an H1. So that's one of the steps that we want to do. So we'll say hello world. And that should be it. There we are, a big red H1. So CSS connection, check. Now we need to do our JavaScript connection. All right, so that's our next checkpoint. Let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to say script.js. And once it's connected, I want to see this console log hello world. So I'm going to go ahead and type that in the file console log hello world. So when I inspect the page right now and I go to the console, it does not say hello world. So it's not connected yet, right? So we have to do one more step in order to connect it. Who can tell me what it is?
We have to link it out. Oh, you can go ahead.
Link it at the bottom of the body there.
Okay, and how can we do that?
It was, let me see.
There's a
Script.
shortcut.
Colon,
What was that?
script, semicolon, src.
Yeah, script.
Script, yeah, and then colon src. And then once we have this, what's the next step?
And the parentheses dot forward to pull up the folder.
To dot slash, and then it'll give us the options of the different files that we can choose from. So just so you know, dot says from this current folder location. That's what the dot indicates. And then when you say slash, then you're able to search the different files or folders if there's folders there. So you here have the different options. Now I'm going to say script.js, and it has to be named, well, this way, the way that I'm showing you to do it, dot slash this way, this is a way to ensure that you don't make a typo by accident and thereby, ruin the connection. So you do dot slash and then find the file name, script.js, select it. And now we see here at the top right of our page, there it is, hello world. Okay, so here's our hello world. Right now we have a connection. So we want to demonstrate now the document query selector. All right, before I do that, I want to do another pulse check. Let's give me some feedback here. How well do we understand how to create the JavaScript file and connect it to the HTML now? All right, I see I'm seeing some better numbers than this morning. That's looking good. All right, fantastic. So we've connected our HTML and JavaScript and CSS. They're connected through the HTML. So the script is in our HTML and our link to our CSS is in our HTML. So this is the meeting point where we're going to create the skeleton of our page. Now let's go ahead and take that first example there. So let's go ahead and paste that in there. I'm going to paste in this hello world. Let's delete the one I wrote. And here I have a H1 with an ID of title. And it says hello world. Okay, this is different. This one has an ID of title. Let's see why it has an ID. Here on the JavaScript, which I'll copy now. So let me go ahead and pull that out. And it says both of these will select the H1 tag. So let's look at what they do. This one is a var, it's a container, it's an H1, and what does it hold? It has the document query selector, document.query selector. So remember the dot notation is for objects, right? Narciso went over objects with you guys on Friday, right? So remember how to access an object is by saying that dot notation. So we're able to use something called the query selector, which is something that searches our page. And if we give it a specification, in this case, it's saying H1. So This one is going to grab all the H1s on the page. This one is going to grab all the H1s on the page. So how about this? Let's console log our H1 and see what we get. So if we go now back to our page, when we console log that H1, we see there waiting for us there, that H1 element, H1 with an ID of title and the words hello world there. So that's what we see when we console log this variable that holds document query selector H1. So this is different from using the keyword this. In the keyword this way of doing things, we would attach the this keyword to the element that we're trying to grab a hold of, like a fishing hook, right? From our JavaScript to our HTML, it's going to grab the element by the this hook and pull it over. This way actually is by making a variable to equal document query selector, which is going to search our document object model, our DOM, and do a query, which means search. It's going to do a query selector. So it's going to do a search and select. And what is it that we want to select? We want to say that in the parentheses. Here is the H1 element. So it's going to look for the H1 element on the page. Okay, so we console log that. We saw that here. Here's our H1 element. Now we want to see another example. Let's look at this one. var title. And in this var title, we have a document query selector. And it has here in the document query selector, hashtag or hash or pound title. Okay, so that hash symbol title. What is this doing? Do you remember how we could access an ID through CSS? How we would say differently than we would do to a class? If we wanted to grab this ID from the CSS, we would say, let's say, hashtag title. And then color, we can set it now to be blue, and that would override the red. So the ID is a way we can grab things through CSS. We wanted to shy away from using that because we said we can only have one type of ID per element per HTML file. And so we want to use it sparingly. This is a way we can use it. We added it to this H1 element, and now we can grab it the same way using that hashtag within the quotations, within the parentheses, attached to this document query selector. So you have document query selector, then the parentheses, open, and then within the parentheses, quotations, within the quotations, you do the hashtag title. So let's see what we can do with this now. Let's just see that we have it. So I'm going to console log title. Let's see what this is. Okay, so hold on a second. Now, I think all right, there it is. So here is now our new console log. And just to make sure that it is what we're looking for, we're going to say, in addition to title, I'm going to say in quotations, this is the element selected by the ID. All right, so now let's see that here. This is the element selected by the ID, and if I refresh, it's this element here, this H1 title. So this is the one that I am grabbing by the ID. And the way I grabbed it is by creating a variable and then making its value, the document query selector, searching for the ID. Right, so at this point, I want us to let me know how well we are understanding how to use the document query selector by attaching it to a variable and then assigning its value to either, this is the general selector. Remember, general element selector can grab all the elements on the page. This one is specific, looking for just an ID with the title. So now that we have it, we're able to console log it. Now that we have it, we're able to console log it. So what else can we do with it? Let's take a look. What else can we do? Now we can, maybe we can change its value. How about we change the value? So we'll say, let's create a function. Let's create a function that will change the value from hello world to, I don't know, Hakuna Matata, something else. All right, so we're going to change the value. So let's create that function change value. And so here we created the function. So what is it going to do? It's going to console, it's going to say title. Once we trigger this function, we're going to say title dot inner HTML. Let's have it to be, how do you spell Hakuna Matata? I don't know how to do that. Abracadabra. Something else, right? We just want to see this change from hello world to something else. So there it is. All right, so now we need to attach this function. Let's attach this function. How can we do that? We need to write in the opening h1 tag. We need to write that we called it the event listener. So on click, the event listener, now we need to attach here. We need to say on click equals, and then in the quotations, we need to access the function name. So let's copy that from here. Let's highlight it, copy it, paste it in here. And now we're going to do on click, we're going to change value. All right, so I think this should work just like this. Am I missing anything? Anyone notice what I should be doing? Let's just see if it works. If it doesn't, we're going to do some debugging. And this is where the console is going to really help us debug. So as soon as I run into my first error, we can learn from that too. So let's see what we got. I'm going to refresh here and I'm going to click. And then we did get an error. So let's learn what it says. Title.innerHTML is not a function. So let's see what we did wrong. Title.innerHTML. So we did something wrong in accessing the inner HTML of the title. So let's see here what we can do. We went into changing the text on this. So inner text, let's change it to that. All right, so we know that was our first bug error. So let's see how we can debug. We're going to take this and we're going to now then just replace what we had here to inner text. And here we are. So I'm going to click it again. Now inner text is not a function. Okay, so what's going on here? Let's just console log what we have. Let's console log this title. So let's comment this out. So we're not doing this now. We're just wanting to console log title. So console.log title. And let's remove the console log from here. We don't need this anymore. Let's just delete it. Right, so here we are. When I click here, I do see the H1 in the on click is accessing change value, which is the function we see here. So we are able to access the title. We're getting it as a value in our function. I'm having an issue with changing the inner text. So let's just take a look to see if I'm doing it right on, oh no, I see what we did wrong. So after the equal sign, it should just be, well, let's just look at it, how it's done here. We're going to say title.innerText equals something else. So we did it completely wrong, but we learned that if we just read the documentation a little bit better, we can say title.inner text, and then we'll say abracadabra here. All right, so now we said title.inner text, it should be something else. So let's test it now. There it is. Okay, we've got that working. And we also learned that when we run into an error, how to test in the console to see that we're receiving the value that we're looking to change. Okay, all right, so the connection is there. So what is my error? It was in the text change itself. I had to just do some editing to the documentation, like check the documentation to make sure I did that correctly. And there it is. We just said this variable, it's inner text. So we're saying that documents dot inner text equals, here we have a string abracadabra. All right. I'm going to do another example of this one, but let's give me some feedback on how we can use the document query selector to change its value, to create a function that we can change its value. Okay. Let's continue. And so we're able to change the inner text that way. Let's create these. Let's create these on and off buttons through the document query selector. So let's go ahead and do that now. I'm going to, let's just comment out everything that we're not using. Okay, so we'll start from fresh, but I want to leave the code there in case you guys want to dissect it, downloading it from the GitHub. All right, so I don't want to delete everything. So I do want to comment it out if I'm not using it though. So here we are working below. And so let's take these buttons. We're going to make these buttons work again, but not through this, not through using this, but through using the document query selector. Okay, so someone direct me. How can I do this? How can I take these three buttons and make some on-off switches out of them? We know that we have to create a function, right? We have to at least start there. Let's start with the function. All right, so we'll say function. Function.
Turn off.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's what we have. Turn off.
And then in parentheses, put the element.
Yes, we want to receive the element. But in this case, we don't
Okay.
need, I'm sorry to interrupt. In this case, we may not need to receive an element because the element is there to receive whatever is hooked on through the this keyword. Through the this.
Okay.
So that is there to receive whatever is hooked on through the this keyword. Instead of accessing it this way through having a parameter there that we can enter, what we want to do is access these buttons. We want to grab a hold of these buttons.
And just paste it in between.
Well, we want to grab them through creating variables and accessing them through the query selector, right? So let's create some variables. We're going to say we need var button 1, and we need to give it a value, right? So we're going to say document dot query selector. So that's going to document search our document dot query selector. It's going to search and select for something, and it has to be within parentheses, within quotes. And so what we want to grab is something by its ID. But what's my issue right now? How can I, why can I not enter anything in here yet?
We have to assign IDs to each of the buttons.
Exactly. So let's go ahead and do that. All right. So ID equals button 1. Button 2. Ooh, I did something there, but I don't know what I did. Button 3. Okay, so 2 and then 3. All right, so I have button 1, 2, and 3. There it is. Let me just shorten this out. All right, button 1, 2, and 3. So let's go ahead and grab that by saying hashtag button 1. Okay, let's test this connection. Let's make sure I actually grabbed it. I'm going to say console.log button 1. All right, so let's test that I actually did this correct. We always want to test our code right after we write a little bit, right? Not like after we've written a lot. Do a little bit of code and a little bit of test. So let's see here what we have. We did get it. We have button 1. We console logged it. So we did this correctly. So we know we can continue. All right, so we don't want to code too much before we test our code. All right, here we have button 1. All I want to do is paste it a couple times and change it to be 2. So 2 here.
Money in the Grave featuring Rick Ross.
We heard you there.
I say sorry.
No worries. Okay, here we are. And now we've grabbed all 3 buttons through this document query selector. And we've assigned each query selector's selection of the ID to each variable that has the same number there. So
Question.
yes.
Is there a reason we don't just call them ID buttons since they're all gonna have the same function? Like, is there a reason we're doing 1, 2, and 3?
Yes, there is. And you know what? We'll test it without having it have 1, 2, and 3. So we'll do both. But I want to show you this way first, and then we'll test that way that you just suggested. Okay, so I have the ID to button 1, button 2, and button 3. I have a document query selector for button 1, button 2, button 3. And we want to find out, and so we want to get Daisy's question as well. Why did I make unique IDs for each button? Well, how come I just didn't call an ID of button for all of them? Well, first thing, number 1 is ID has to be unique, right? You cannot use the same ID for multiple elements. But maybe I can make this a class, right? Maybe I can make this a class. And I could select it by the class instead of through the hashtag. Why not, just use the same class name? We can avoid that discrepancy there. Well, we'll test that. We'll figure it out. Let's go ahead and do the functionality first. All right, let's test it this way, and then I'll go with that suggestion, and then we'll see why. All right, so we're gonna see element inner text. We're gonna, instead of say element.inner text, we're gonna say the dot inner text of the button. So we're gonna say, let's just change one at a time, button 1, and then we're gonna switch it from on to off. So this should switch it from on to off. We have the function turn off. Okay, we've linked it through the on click, and so we've set the functionality to be button 1.inner text equals off. So let's go see if this works. All right, so let's click the first button, and there it is. It's switched off. There it is. Okay, it only goes off. It doesn't go back to on. In order to make it go back on, what do we have to do?
Change the function.
What do we have to change about the function to make it be able to switch back to on?
So do it like a else if.
Exactly. Yep, we need it to have that if else statement so that it has that functionality. If it's on, then switch it off. If it's off, then switch it on. So we need to make it be able to turn back and forth based on that logic. So let's create it if, and then our condition is going to be in here, and our do something section is here. So let's put a condition in there. if let's just take this. If button one dot inner text, and then let's switch the equal sign so make it a question. If it's equal to off, then we just take this and then make it on. So paste it in there, and then we'll say on. Let's test that this works. All right, so switched it to off, but it still doesn't switch on. Okay, so we can write then the else, and then we just switch it back to off. So I'm gonna just move this all the way down, and let's test it out now. So I'm gonna refresh my page after I've saved my JavaScript file, and I switch it from off. Does it switch back on? No, it doesn't. So I did something wrong.
You have an extra equal sign in the if statement.
Thank you for that. Okay. So let's go ahead and delete that extra equal sign, because this would have been asking a question, not making a statement, not declaring something to be value changed, right? So good catch there. Now let's go ahead and erase that. And so now let's refresh after I save. I'm going to click this on button, switches to off, switches to on, switches to off, switches to on. Now let's go back. Let's go ahead and backtrack a little bit to making these just button without any numbers here. I'm going to take out button one out of everything. Everything now is just button. Nothing has a unique ID or class. You're not supposed to have multiple elements with IDs. We'll just leave it anyways and see what happens. All right. So what I'm going to do now. Did I skip switching? Oh, okay. You know what? This one I'm going to switch off, and we'll comment it out. We don't need to see that. All right. So now if I click the first one, dot inner text, cannot read properties of null, reading inner text. Okay, so let's see what that means. Uncaught type error, cannot read properties of null, reading inner text. So there's our first error. Okay. Oh, let's switch this out. I need to take this away. All right. Notice that. Let's test it one more time. Here we go. Now, if I refresh and I click the first one, this one is off, on. And if I click the second one switches the first. Third one switches the first. So there's a confusion there on which one is supposed to turn off and on based on the click. Because if you make it a general ID, or even if this was a class, if you make it general and you make it so that every time you switch one, the function turns all of them from off to on because they all have that ID. You're controlling that ID, and then it's, in this case, it's only changing the first one. So all the buttons are only changing the first one. See if we can change this to class. All right, so I'm going to select this ID, and I'll show you guys a cool shortcut while I'm at it. So I'm going to change all three IDs. I'm going to say command, hold down the command key, and then press D on my keyboard, D. And so I'm then able to select multiple of the same at the same time. And then I'm going to press the right arrow on my keyboard. Okay. All right. Then I can backspace and then switch all three at once. So now I've changed them all to be class button. And so I want to do this here as well. So I'm going to do command D. On PC, it's control. And then backspace, and then I'll say dot button. Now I've switched it to be a class. So now I shouldn't have that problem where multiple elements can't have the same ID. So that shouldn't be cause of any error. Now, if I click all three buttons, I'm getting the same result still. Didn't matter that I switched them to class. if I click on any button, it only switches the first one. And that's because I'm only accessing one at a time and hooking them all up to the same function. So I'm making all my IDs switch. So if I flip one, they all have the same functionality to control the first one. That's my error that I would run into. Does that answer your question there, Daisy?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. So then all I want to do now is switch it back to what I had before. So I'm going to just Command Z and do Control Z to edit undo. I'm going to switch them to have unique IDs again. Let's put it back here. So Control Z, Control Z, Control Z, or Command Z if you're on a Mac like me. All right, there we are. Okay, so here we are. Back to this. Now I have a controlled on-off switch. Oh, no, it's not right. So what did I forget to do? If button one dot inner text, okay, so they all have access to the same function, turn off. So all of the buttons switch button one off and on. So you know what I could do to make this even better is to switch this to be the turn off one function. So, and then I'll copy this and then paste it. I'm going to highlight the first instance of one and then do Command D to highlight all the ones following it. All right, then I'll backspace, press enter 2. And so then I'll switch this function to 2. And I'll do the same for 3. Okay, so highlight this 2, Command D, switch it to 3, and then put it in here 3. Okay, so now each on click has its own unique function. Turn off 1, turn off 2, and turn off 3. They are all unique to turn off button 1, button 2, and button 3. So I have 3 on-off switches here. So on-off, unique. On-off, this one is unique. All right, so all the switches now have their own unique functions to turn off their respective switches.
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay, so can you, like in the first function that we wrote, it's button 1. Can you include button 2? So if you turn on button 1, then it would turn off, like in the else if it would turn off button 2.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Yeah, you can make it wired any way you want. You can make it so that when you click button 1, it turns button 3 off.
Yeah.
Right, so you can wire it I just wired it this way so that when I click button 1, I want to see button 1 go on and off. But we can make it that way. Let's make it so when you click button 1, button 3 switches on and off. I have to say turn off 1, go to this function, and then the functionality has to be for button 3. So I'll just switch it out here. Okay, so this is the only thing I need to switch in this case. If I click button 1, button 3 goes on and off. You see how I did that? I just made the function for button 1 turn off button 3 that way. So now let's edit undo, go back to what we had it as before. Great question, by the way. All right, so now's the time to ask if you have any questions about what I just showed you guys. How to make the on-off switches work instead of using this by using the document query selector. It was a little bit more work, wasn't it? I mean, I had to create these variables, do this, and I couldn't just pass in the keyword this. It was a little bit different than that. Instead of just passing in keyword this, now I'm doing it through the document query selector.
In terms of like functionality, is there a scenario where using query selector over this is ideal, or is it more of like a personal preference thing?
There is instances where I find it's more ideal. We want to show you both for whatever code, however your code that you may encounter for your job may be, how to handle either or. I do prefer to use the document query selector over this, and I'll show you guys why. You'll see an example in some of your assignments that I'll show you now. So let me see here, the button clicker. For the button clicker, for example, yeah, I can use this as an example. For this area here, this area, when we have the button removed, we have a blank empty space. That's because we've only removed the button, right? So we can just add the keyword this to attach this button to the function and enter it in as the argument for the parameter, right? So we can use the keyword this that way to just remove the button. But what if you wanted to, when you click the button, remove the whole entire div that contains that thing there that says dogenary defined by you, that box, this div. What if I wanted to delete the whole entire div that contains the button? I would use a document query selector for this, because instead of, I wouldn't have to attach this, because I would only be able to remove this, the button, if I use this. So I would attach the document query selectors to this. So yeah, this would be a better instance. I would find it easier to make a query selector to remove the entire box that it's contained in. So think about, for example, let's look at the dojo weather assignment. Look at this assignment. In this one, we have the functionality where you want to remove this entire cookie div area when you click the I accept. All right, clicking I accept will dismiss the cookie policy message. So the whole entire div that contains it, as you see here, nothing in this area. The way I would do that is just like I said for the other example, I would use the query selector. So I'd access the div containing everything, and on the functionality to just dot remove, the way I would the ID that I would use the query selector to access this box. Okay, so in instances where you have to delete larger sections of the area that you clicked in, I would advise the query selector. So let's continue. And let's look at a bit more of the query selector here. We can also change the image itself. So for example, in this one here, we have a div class nav, and we're able to grab the image here through the document query selector. Once we grab it, we can also change the SRC to be a different image. Okay, so let's look at that a bit more. All right, so here's an example. I'm going to take this one here. I'm going to copy this image tag. I'm going to comment out my previous work. Leave it for you guys in case you want to dissect or take a look at that. Okay, let's go down. Command / to comment. Okay. Here we are. Okay. So let's take that bit of code that we saw there. Okay, so here I have image tag with the SRC being cat. So I need to pull up a cat image from somewhere. And then I have this alt to be a cat image. So that's the text there that shows up in case my image breaks or screen readers. And this ID for this image, pet image. And then below this image, I have a button with an event listener on click. This event listener is looking for this function, switch image. So let's then go to our JavaScript here. And then here we have var pet image. So it's a variable holding a document query selector of that image. And then a function here. A function image switch. So it takes that pet image and it switches the src and the alt. So we say .src to equal a new src and an alt to be a new alt. So let's go ahead and switch a cat to a dog. So let's grab both images. Cat image. What's the good one? This one. This one's okay. All right, so here we are. So I'm in week 2, day 1, afternoon. Okay, here we are. So I want to make an images folder. Save it as cat. Okay, so let's take a look. Here it is. So I want it to say / images cat. So let's take a look at our cat image. There it is. And when I click this button, I want to switch it to a dog. Doesn't work right now because the functionality has not yet been defined. So let's pull that functionality into our JavaScript. So here we have it. Okay, so maybe a little bigger is better. Nope, smaller is better. Here we are. So I grab the ID pet image through the document query selector. I assign it to this variable. And now this function is going to switch my image's source .src, and it's looking for a dog image. So now let's go ahead and find that dog image. It's too cute. Dog. Save it here. Okay, so there's my dog image. Okay. And / oh, didn't do it. / images, and then dog.jpg. Okay, so here we are. If I now click the switch button, oh, it's so big. So let's control the image size through the CSS just to make this fix. So I'll say image. All my images should have a height of 300 pixels. And the height controls the width as well. So you control one dimension, you control the other. So now I'll click the switch button. Oh, what happened? Oh, it doesn't switch back. I didn't make it to be able to switch back. We can do that. But here we are. Switch. And it turned into a dog. Let's add that functionality just to make sure that we know how to do that. Let's make it an actual switch. So if it's a dog, make it a cat. So if the src is equal to this dog one, make it equal to the cat. and also change the alt. So we're going to change the alt as well. And we need to add the else statement. So else, and then we'll take these here and this will be our else. Okay, there we are. So now let's see this work. Switch. Oh, it doesn't work back. Okay, let's refresh. Switch. All right, it stops. So it doesn't work yet. What did I do wrong? We didn't say. Oh, here, it did it again. So now let's switch. Oh, it still doesn't work. Okay, hold on a second. All right, I'm glad I'm running into these errors so you guys can see me debug so that you can do the same thing. Now I want it to switch. So we know we can get it to switch from the dog to the cat, right? So let's see. Now we start off with it being a cat. And so we test, we say, if it's a dog, switch it to a cat. Else, switch it back to a dog. So this else is working, right? Because when I switch here, this works. But when I switch, it doesn't switch back. So here's where I want to inspect the console and test to see what is or isn't triggering. So let's console log at each step. So I'm going to say console.log switched to cat. And I'm going to say console.log switched to dog. So anytime I click now, I should see the console log for what I'm switching to. So if I refresh and I click here, the switch to dog. So I know I triggered this and I know I entered this area. Else it wouldn't have, it would not have console log this if it didn't enter this else. So I know I was able to reach this here. And it was able to switch the pet image.src and then do this here. It was able to switch this source and the alt, right? Because if I inspect this, let's check the alt for this one here. Its alt says dog image. Its alt says dog image. So now I know I did switch it from a cat to a dog, but I can't switch it from a back to a cat. So let's see why it doesn't do that. So if I click the button again, it says switch to dog. So it entered this else once again. It entered this else once again. So it console logged switch dog. So I entered this else once again. And that's because I did not trigger this. I did not trigger this. So that means that pet image.src is not equal to /images/dog.jpg. But let's see what it is. I mean, let's see, inspect. And how about this? We're going to console log. In addition to switch to dog, we're going to console log the pet image src each time. So this way, each time I hit this else, I'm also going to see switch to dog and then the pet image.src. So this should tell me if the src is actually this. So let's take a look. I'm going to switch it now. Switch to dog. And I'm now getting an error because I'm in the live server. So let's avoid using this live server. I'm going to copy path and do it this way. So I switch now, and if I click it again, what does the console say? Switch to dog file users. Oh, okay, so it's looking for the file path location, like the not the relative file path location. And it keeps switching it from this general file path location to this one. So something about the way I'm accessing the file is not it is not liking it.
Is it how you stored the pictures inside the file?
Well, could be that. Let me see here. So this is able, it's working to be able to switch it from a cat to a dog through this. So this is working just fine to be able to assign an SRC value. Let's just take a look one more time. So when I first click it, it's able to see that general file path through the relative file path. Switch dog to, and now it says cat.jpg. Hold on a second. That should say dog, right? It should say dog. It should say dog.jpg instead of cat. So there's my issue. I know that it should be saying dog first, because when I switch it now, it says dog. And when it switches to dog, it keeps staying on dog. So the issue is in the way I'm calling the file path. Something in here isn't registering. So let's try and fix this a little bit, and then we'll move along. Okay, so I want to see here if petimage.src is equal to, and for now, I'm just going to use this incredibly annoying long file path to be instead of the relative one. And I am going to see if I can make it shorter, if I can just get it working first. So let's change this here. So this is the large file path location. This is not going to be ideal, but let's just see if this is going to be the solution, if it's being problematic just for this here. This is going to be for dog, and this one is going to be for cat. Okay, is it going to work now? Let's see. Switch. Oh, now it's acting different. Okay, so this is progress. This is progress. Switch to cat. So if the file path is cat, so actually here's where I want it to be dog, and then here's where I want it to be cat. Okay, now it said switch to dog. So I did enter that else, but the file path didn't register to switch to dog. Is that correct? Hold on a second. So I started having a cat, and then I clicked the switch. Because I said if it equals dog, then switch. It's not dog, so it's going to enter this else, and it's going to say switch to dog. All right, so it did switch. And then we have it petimage.src, and this should be, I mean, okay, well, I thought this would be dog. I mean, I thought this would be cat. So now let's test it. So it's not actually switching through the file path even when it enters here. So let me see if that short file path will be better. // images dog dot JPEG. There we are. Okay. There it is. Switch to dog, switch to cat. So what it was dependent on this general file path location. I think I should be able to shorten this though. Let me just try one last fix. If it doesn't work, then I'll just keep the working version. Okay. There we are. Okay. It was something in my functionality I couldn't see until I replaced it with the long file path. All right.
Are
So
we gonna be doing some switching on the test, you think?
yes, definitely. You'll have to
Okay.
do some switching, possibly on one of the test versions that you'll have. So this is something that you may want to reference for your notes, how I had this built. I can even make this even to be a little bit different. Do you remember how we use on mouse over, on mouse out? We can switch it to be so when we hover over the image, it switches to a cat. And when we hover out of the image, it switches back to the dog. So let's make that instead of the switch button. Instead of the switch button. So let's say on the image itself, on mouse over, equals quotes. And so here I'll say image switch. And then on mouse out. And then same function. It's going to do the same function. Okay, I don't even need a button anymore. So let's test it now. So if I hover over, if I hover over the cat, it switches to a dog, and if I hover out, it should do the same function, but it's not switching. It does register here. Switch to dog, switch to dog, switch to dog, switch to dog. Okay, so something's still not, oh, there it is. Okay, so let's fix this and then continue. But before I continue there, I want to make sure that we understand the first function. All right, I'm getting a little ahead here. Did we understand how we did this to get it working through the button? Okay. It's making more sense. Now let's make it to work with the on mouse over, on mouse out. So on mouse over, I'm going to trigger that switch image. You know what? In order to like completely make this just way easier, I'm going to not even have to deal with this image switch function. Let's make a new function for this on mouse over, on mouse out. So we can call two separate functions. So on mouse over, switch to cat. Or no, what do we start off with? We say start off, switch to dog, switch to dog. And then on this function, on mouse over, we'll say switch to dog. And then we'll say this here. Make the SRC to be the dog one and the alt to be for dog image as well. There's something here I did wrong. Function, I need to call the function. Okay, so function switch to dog. Okay, so let's see this working. And I'm on mouse over. And now the on mouse out is, we need to get that working. Okay, so switch to cat. How about that? So let's switch this to be cat. 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 Okay, so on mouse over, it's a dog. On mouse out, it's a cat. Let's hover over from below. On mouse over is a dog. On mouse out is a cat. Right, this is something you may encounter on your test. Something just like this.
Would either way be correct, like an if-else statement, or if we did two separate functions?
Well, it depends on the specifications of the test. I'm not going to tell you which test version has which, but it will say, it'll give you instructions just like what you see here. There'll be specific instructions on what the functionality should be like. And in addition to the wireframe instructions, you'll see on the bottom a GIF or a GIF, however you want to pronounce it, a GIF that shows the moving image of how the JavaScript function should look like. So what the actual visualization of the functionality, what it looks like, and how it should be done. So you'll have exact specific instructions. So if it's a button, you'll say make a button to do it. Or if it's on mouse over, it'll say upon user hovering over this image, it should switching out based on a hover out of the image. So it'll say, so it won't leave you guessing for sure. Okay, did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, and here we have another switch example. This is going to be one to switch from dark to light mode, right? Remember, we see these switches all the time. Here's one on this page. I can click the switch. It's an on-off switch to switch from dark mode to light mode. How was this built? How was this built? This is built using something just like this. If element.classlist contains dark mode, element.innerText switch to light mode. This is switching the text, but switching the actual colors is just a matter of functionality, finding the colors and then switching them on the page. But we start by creating a functionality, switching the words. Once we make the word switch, we know that we can replace the values of what we want to be switched. Right? I bet that if we inspect this page here, we would even see on this button. So if we click this button here, label, this is for before and after. And so the switching is done a little bit before in the CSS here. But before we learn how to do that in the CSS, we can do it through the JavaScript just as easy. Okay, so this is the way we're going to be able to access values in our HTML and then switch the values here. Okay, moving along. Now there's a lot to cover here, and I hope to cover more in the test demos that I'm going to create tomorrow. All right, so I'm going to do a test demo. I'm going to give you guys this test demo so you can test yourself within a 5-hour limit how well you feel. But you can see how you can do on your test tomorrow or on Wednesday. Okay, so input and change. I think I will have to cover this tomorrow during the test preview. What I want you guys to do now is have a little bit of practice time with changing elements on the DOM. So here now we are going to pivot over to our lab time. So we're going to group up and create Magic 8-Ball. So who remembers the Magic 8-Ball toy from childhood? Let's see. Magic 8-Ball toy. This Magic 8-Ball toy, I remember having one, and what it was is you would be able to shake the ball and it gives you this random answer, right? There's an octagon in there or some kind of shape with multiple triangles that when you shake it, it gives you different answers, right? Netflix and chill. So what we're gonna do is create a Magic 8-Ball using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, all right, with our groups. So create a black ball in the middle of your HTML. Start off with that as a template. Create an answer area or section here. And we're going to take that functionality of life's answers this morning and apply it so that whenever you click a button, or maybe you click the triangle, or maybe on hovering over it, actually make it a button click. On button click of a button somewhere outside, make the button the blue button or the blue text itself or some button outside of it so that it will switch, okay? You want to create the HTML and CSS and then quickly pivot to the JavaScript. You want to make the JavaScript to work. Did someone have a question? No? Okay, so remember, it's not about HTML and CSS. Don't spend more than 20 minutes on that. Okay, get a basic template there, and then switch to the JavaScript functionality. I want you guys to be able to make it work. Then you can go back and polish the HTML and CSS. You can even switch it to be from, instead of the Magic 8-Ball, you can be like a Zohar theme. There was this this guy Zoltar, not Zohar. Zoltar the fortune teller was this
Hilarious.
You put in the money and he tells you your fortune. So you can make your life's answers randomly select, make it a Zoltar instead of an 8-Ball. So, however you'd like to style your page, start with an easy template, okay? Start with the Magic 8-Ball and then work from there. Okay, then you can customize it to be whatever you'd like. So you guys have an hour to work, and then we'll present after we're done. Okay, does anyone have any questions about what we're doing now? Okay, looks good then. Let's stop the share. I'll pause the recording, and then we'll meet up again when we're finished. So you guys have an hour. Remember, don't spend too much time at HTML, CSS. Let's create some Magic 8-Balls.